So welcome to the last panel for today. The session is on the future of work, achieving a sustainable gig economy. My name is PeiChin. I'm from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. We're a not-for-profit organization that works with global leaders to develop and deliver policies and programs that harness technology for good. And it's really good to see all of you here today. Also, I believe that this is the first time that we are participating in the APEC Regional Internet Governance Forum. And we thank the organizers here for this wonderful opportunity. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by an international panel of female speakers through no bias of mine. And I would like to welcome, first of all, Ms. Jamie Koh. Jamie is the director of GRAD's Regional Public Affairs team. They look into public policy topics relating to technology and its impact in the region. With the rest of the team, they build partnerships with governments to support national policies, engage with governments and other stakeholders on policy discussions, and drive initiatives to harness the potential of technology to create impact. And second is Kyoungmi Oh, also known as Kimi. So Kimi is a researcher at OpenNet Korea and a doctoral candidate in cultural policy. Her research focuses on the Korean webtoon artist platform, where many webtoon artists have made a living out of the distribution of intellectual property rights. And joining us virtually from the Netherlands is Assistant Professor Jovana Karanovic. She is the founder and managing director of Reshaping Work, and also the assistant professor at the Rotterdam School of Management. Hi, Jovana. So Jovana founded Reshaping Work out of her passion for digital innovations and their potential to lead the economy towards a sustainable future. It is now recognized as one of the leading authorities in the domain. Last but not least, supporting us online is my colleague, Oliver Large. Ollie is our senior policy analyst in the digital government unit, and he has a strong interest in the future of work and reimagining democratic institutions for the digital age. Hi, Ollie. So we will have, we don't have any presentation, so we'll jump straight into the Q&A, after which we will open up the floor to audience, and in-person audience here will be able to ask the questions using the mic in front, and audiences joining us online, please do type in your question as well as your name, organization, and country you're from, and Ollie will help to pick this up on your behalf. So, today's forum is focused on sustainability and inclusion, and I've really enjoyed earlier discussions around, what does it mean to put people at the heart of the internet? What does the internet, mean for the environment? And a lot of discussions earlier on in the day talked about the need to close the digital divide. In the global market, labor market, technology is rapidly restructuring and testing the limits of existing institutions that have been set out to support workers. Technology is a key driver for economic growth and productivity, and is also creating opportunities for people to benefit from more flexible ways of working. At the same time, however, this can also imply shifting risks from businesses and towards individual workers who may have limited income security, social and health protection, as well as avenues for collective representation and bargaining. So the question that we would like to discuss today would be kind of centering around how do we achieve the right equilibrium between value for businesses, consumers, and workers? How do we put workers at the heart of it to build a future of works that works for everyone? So firstly, I'd like to set the scene for the gig economy and how digital labor platforms, or DLPs, play a key role in it. The gig economy itself is not new, but the DLPs are a growing presence in the global economy. There are around 800 platforms that exist today all over the world, and there's been a tenfold increase since 2007, 2008. And by DLPs, we refer to digital platforms that have three unique elements. One is the mediation of supply of and demand for labor. Secondly, is around algorithmic control. For example, means by which workers are matched to clients. And thirdly, we refer to businesses who are classified as tech companies and workers typically classified as self-employed. And whilst the matching of workers to clients is digital, work can take place virtually or in person. Hence, the DLP economy can include services such as Grab that you're, of course, very familiar with, as well as web-based or cloud platforms that offer services including legal, financial, creative services such as the Webtoon. So to kick us off, I'd like to go to Jovana. Can you tell us about the key benefits of the gig economy for workers on both web-based and location-based platforms?
Hello, everybody. First of all, super happy to be here with you today. When it comes to benefits of digital labor platforms, there are many, and this is evidenced by a huge demand for these platforms because they're really valued by customers. When it comes to workers, one of the big benefits is human capital specialization. So due to better matching across the globe, skills that were previously underutilized can now be put to use. Think of people that have some rare or hard to find unusual skills. Well, when it comes to online labor platforms, they have a global market at their disposal. So they can find a client that is looking precisely for those skills. So digital labor platforms definitely allowed for expansion of the labor market in that sense. Related to this and related to online labor platforms is also increased possibility for borderless immigration. So imagine people in less developed countries can now access job opportunities in more developed countries, which of course provides a number of benefits. Better wages, but also knowledge spillovers by being able to work from people from different cultures. Another thing that is definitely cited as a benefit of digital labor platforms is low labor market entry barriers. This is the case both for online and on-location platforms, but especially for on-location platforms that don't require very high level of skills. That means that individuals can very easily access the labor market and start working. And this is especially beneficial for individuals that are maybe between jobs. Think about a huge mental and psychological toll somebody without a job has. Well, digital labor platforms provides this easy access to the labor market and allow individuals to immediately generate some income. When it comes to online labor platforms, what is especially beneficial besides being able to access clients from anywhere is also that there is less discrimination on these platforms that were going on in physical workplaces. So the individuals that were traditionally excluded from labor markets, such as senior citizens, for instance, or stay-at-home mothers or individuals with disabilities, have now increased opportunities to find jobs. And obviously, I'm now just talking about benefits because that was the question, but for all of these things, it's a double-edged sword, and we will discuss later on what are some of the disadvantages when it comes to this. And finally, the final benefit is the flexibility, so that individuals that are just looking for a side gig, that are looking for supplementing their income, or students can now access this flexible labor market. But like I said, again, we will also discuss what are some downsides of that.
That's great. Thank you, Jovana, for helping us to set the scene. And indeed, I think that especially during periods of lockdown, we're definitely very grateful for the work of these frontline workers. And flexibility is something that we hear about very often. And I'd like to now turn to Jamie. Can you tell us, through your engagement with workers, people who work with Grab, what are their primary motivations for joining the platform?
Thanks, PeiChin, and thanks, Jovana, for the great introduction, because I think I'm going to bring some examples that actually relate back to the benefits you raised. So in terms of the Grab driver delivery partners we engage with and hear from them, they're actually not homogeneous. A lot of them come from very diverse backgrounds. And there's, for example, one group that chose this lifestyle because of their lifestyle needs. Some of them are caregivers and they have circumstances which require them to work very, very odd hours that is not compatible with traditional employment. Some of them are on side hustles, some of them have a job and want to supplement their income. And this is basically a kind of work that can complement their lifestyle. There's also another group of people who are probably transitioning between jobs. They either got laid off or can't find a job that they want, and they basically need a quick way to earn money. And I think Jovana covered that about easy access, right? There are also groups of people who find this to be the best source of income given their backgrounds and qualifications, because it's challenging for them to be able to access other earnings opportunities. But in spite of the difference and the various reasons they all come onto the platform, I think two commonalities we do see and hear a lot. Number one, which you mentioned earlier, was flexibility. Actually, 70% of our partners that we surveyed cited flexibility as the reason for why they take up work on the platform. And because they can choose to work whenever they want, decide not to work anymore, take out work across many platforms at the same time and do another job at the same time. So that's really important to them. Secondly, is the quick access to an income, because when someone needs some money, it's quite challenging in a traditional employment format where you need to go for an interview, wait for all the candidates to be interviewed, figure out whether you're going to get a job or not. On the platforms like Grab, it's quite easy in terms of being able to access earnings opportunities, and that's of value to them. And that's why I think it's important to keep in mind these benefits of this way of work, so that we can help ensure that people who are seeking these forms of work enjoy these benefits that traditional employment formats can't provide them with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And so we've been to the Netherlands. We talked about the state of things in Singapore. So turning to Kyoungmi from South Korea, can you tell us what is the state of things in your country, and also briefly kind of describe to us what webtoon platforms are? I'm not sure if everybody here is a fan of K-drama. I definitely am. So a little bit familiar with webtoons. So if you can tell us more about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. South Korea's digital platforms are quite similar with Ms. PeiChin Tae's introduction on digital platforms. And almost all the experts analyzing the digital platforms, gig economy, and the future of work are predicting that the number of digital platform workers or gig workers will increase more. However, some platforms were outright banned in South Korea. In 2015, Uber, which first started services in Seoul, was forcibly banned. And in 2020, Tada, a ride-sharing service based on rental cars, was also banned. In Korea, taxi business requires a license, but the license is very expensive in Korea. So self-employed taxi drivers who bought a license and operate a taxi business took collective action to ban Uber and Tata services. And during the collective action, four drivers committed suicide. As a result, the ride sharing is totally banned in Korea as of now. So that is the state of things in South Korea. And on Webtoon platform, in terms of creative industry and intellectual property, Webtoon have become popular since mid-2000. The portal service platform like Naver, and now it changes the name Kakao, published comics in the digital form. After that, Webtoon platforms have become the basic form to publish comics. Today, Webtoon platforms become a key source of creativity and creative industry in South Korea. One unique element of creative industry is that it is high-risk industry. Webtoon platform is considered today as an effective means of reducing such risk. So actually, Webtoon is used as a one-source multi-use. So it used to reinvent like a K-drama or K-movie. So, but Webtoon platform is considered today as an effective means of reducing such risk. No matter how experienced a writer, an artist, or a doctor is, it is very difficult to guarantee that the next work will be successful. It is an industry that need to attract people's heart and to steal people's mind. As there are many and different basic conditions necessary for a work to succeed, such narrative, ethics, visual effects, and publicity of a writer, producer, director, actor, actress, etc. Since a good platform hosts an extremely diverse and numerous ranges of Webtoon, it is accepted that a successful Webtoon within such competitive environment has a box office potential when it is turned into film. Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Yeah. So Webtoon really is a kind of key source of creativity and IP in South Korea. So we kind of covered some of the key benefits around digital label platforms, whether it's location-based platform or web-based platforms such as Webtoon. And I think, as Jamie mentioned, the kind of heterogeneous nature of motivations behind workers is probably precisely one of the reasons that makes any kind of regulatory measures in this space so difficult. As Jovana mentioned at the beginning, there are a lot of benefits, that research has found, especially in more informal economies and in the way in which the platforms can aggregate supply and demand and also reduce barriers to entry. However, some of our research has found that a lot of platforms do fall short when it comes to providing so-called good work. And in our own research, platform workers tell us that they value control, flexibility, and income as some of the elements of good work. This is probably quite sort of aligned with your research, Jamie. So maybe going back to Jovana and Kyoungmi, can you tell us whether, in your view, do the platform companies achieve this sort of good work? And if not, what are some of the drivers behind this? Maybe we can start with Jovana.
Yes. So for me, the biggest issue that I see that's happening at the moment is that we have a platform owner at the center stage, right? And then platforms have sites, right? They may have 2 or more sites. They may have like Uber passengers and Uber drivers, but they may also have 3 sites, like food delivery platforms. They have customers, they have riders, and they also have restaurants. However, the information about tasks, very often about what goes into price calculation, also information on the side of customers and the end user is all in the possession of platforms. Of platform owners. And this creates some power disbalance where platform owners have disproportionately more power compared to either side. And this gives them discretion over certain things. One of the major issues pertains to algorithmic management. So the platforms rely on sophisticated algorithms in order to manage task execution, in order to assign tasks, in order to reward workers. And while algorithms have certainly brought a lot of efficiencies, if you think of taxi industry, for instance, there is much less idle time. They're able, based on GPS location, to manage drivers to passengers much easier. We also know, or we have accounts of algorithms being used in a way that does not benefit workers. For example, algorithmic nudging is a tactic where workers would get notifications that would nudge them to behave in a desired way. So for example, if a worker is about to quit working, he or she may get a notification, are you sure you're very close to your earnings goal? And this can be problematic if you're talking about ride hailing, for instance. It is not safe for a driver to stay on the road for very long hours that can put others in danger. So this algorithmic nudging that is in the hands of platforms is pretty problematic. And at the moment, it requires some self-regulation because regulations are too slow to pick up with that and put in place some instruments that would limit or that would ensure the platforms behave in a way that is beneficial for workers as well. Another issue related to that is also income insecurity, that while there is this flexibility, there is also insecurity with how much income a worker will end up with at the end of the month. We know that a number of platforms set prices in real time. They adjust prices based on supply and demand at any given time. And again, this is beneficial because at the moment, when you have a lot of demand, platforms are able, by offering certain perks and bonuses, to expand supply, right? To motivate more workers to join in and to meet this growing demand. On the other hand, this means that prices vary. And for those workers that depend on platforms to make full-time living, not knowing what income they're going to end up with at the end of the month is problematic. And this also infringes upon this flexibility because workers can earn more if they work during these times of high demand. So this is especially the case when it comes to food delivery, ride-hailing. Less so for some other services that don't have these real-time price adjustments. So if a worker really wants to earn more, he or she has less flexibility because he or she may need to get out on the road at this moment of this high demand and take advantage of that. So for me, that this would be the two major issues that we would need to tackle together with platforms, together with regulators. So the issue of power disbalance and the issue of income insecurity.
Thank you, Jovana. How does this play out in the sort of web-based platform, Kyoungmi?
Wait, okay. Yeah, actually, I do not just focus on Webtoon platform. I just, over the platforms. Okay, the situation of digital platform in South Korea is quite gloomy because of the local context. So actually, initially, in order to attract workers, the digital platforms advertise themselves as satisfying those elements of flexibility. Many people quit traditional jobs to work for platforms, but now many platform workers criticize the platforms for not having these elements because algorithmic management is not positive to workers in terms of flexibility and revenue in South Korea, as I shall talk about now. Yeah, until 2019, the food delivery service platform Wahan Youth imposed fines to manage the workers' attendance. They terminate the workers if the workers was absent from work without notice 3 times. Also, the quick response matters most. The union leader said that he could feel the decrease in the number of assigned tasks when he ignores the signal indicating the task. He also said that the higher the driver's evaluation level, the more likely they are assigned work in a peak hours, such as lunchtime and dinner time. So you have no choice but to work as the algorithm arranges the work. Under this condition, it's very hard for you to leave the work, even for just an hour. And the skill and talent sharing service platform generally determine the number and likelihood of exposure based on a score given by a rating. South Korea is very competitive society, as you know. If you do not upload your content regularly, you'll be forgotten very quickly in the platform. Additionally, to stand out among competitors, the service providers are likely to lower the prices. And in the case of Webtoon platform, both content management through algorithm and artist management by human producers are being implemented at the same time. Like Netflix, basically Webtoon platform use recommendation algorithm, but lots of Webtoon platforms list Webtoon at the top or best position of websites first page for a certain period by charging promotion fee to artists. Also, since artists must upload new works every week, a human producer who directly manages them ensure that their work is uploaded on time. Actually, although it now abolished, the late fees were imposed by human producers. Sometimes the managers intervene the overall flow of the story and detail of the work, such as colors or looking for characters. So it's not that quite bright situation.
Yeah, so the element of control definitely kind of comes up quite a bit through our research, as also mentioned by Jovana and Kyoungmi. And in many ways, I think it kind of goes against the flexibility that the workers thought that they were going to get through working with such platforms, and that has always been seen as a very sort of contentious area. And I think relating to that and information asymmetry, one of the key concerns is also around data collection, how it is being fed into algorithms, and in turn how that controls the way in which work is being allocated, remunerated, and assessed. So I just wanted from Jamie, what sort of worker or user feedback have you collected around these aspects? How has the business model or user experience evolved as a result of hearing those feedback?
Thank you, PeiChin. So actually there are three parts in your question, which I'll answer separately. One of it is about collection of data. Second one is about how algorithms are used and its implication on, I think, allocation of work, remuneration and assessment. And then finally about any feedback we've received and how we've adapted the business model and experience. So very quickly on data, we actually, at Grab, we actually do have a privacy notice, which lays out what data we collect, how we store it, how we use it, because we ensure we are complying with personal data protection guidelines in the region we operate with. So this is just on high level on data. In terms of how this is used in algorithms, I guess I'll address each of the three scenarios you talked about earlier. So in terms of allocation, just to give a sense before I talk about how the data is used, the allocation algorithm is essentially to ensure that a job can be completed. For example, when a consumer orders food from a restaurant, how do we ensure it gets delivered? And the objective, of course, is to get the food delivered, but the algorithm tries to optimize to do it in a way that's efficient, not just for the consumer, but also for the delivery partner, because for delivery partners, they want to get the job done quickly and not waste their time waiting here and there as well, so they can use the time to do other jobs or go home, right? So examples of data points that are used in algorithms like this is, for example, understanding of historical wait times at restaurants, because this can then factor into allocation recommendations as to, okay, if this restaurant typically takes a longer time to prepare the food, then I can allocate a driver or delivery partner a bit later. So that's an example of data point we use. Another one is also actually the order in itself. Is it a large order? Does it have many things? Because we have delivery partners who are walking, people who are cycling a bicycle, people who are on a motorbike, and people who drive cars. And depending on the type of order, you might want to allocate it to somebody who's better equipped to make the delivery. And there are also examples of using data of actual road conditions, the routes that delivery partners take, because this is important in an order in itself, because it keeps the consumers updated to expect when the order will be delivered. And this information also feeds back into algorithm to learn in future. Is it that certain routes take a little bit longer? And how do we then manage expectations and ensure that, they can be remunerated based on the effort as well? So that links a little bit to the second point on remuneration, right? Actually, a lot of the actual road conditions, how people travel, the route taken and the effort spent, those are data points that feed back into the algorithm, so that in future, when there are similar trips, then the algorithm is better able to price it in a way to ensure that efforts are adequately compensated. Then if I then link to the last one, you talked about assessment, right? So in assessment, I guess those of you who have used the Grab app will know that there is a rating feature you can have after a transaction is completed. Actually, it's mutual. The driver or delivery partner also gets to rate the experience with the customer. But how such data is used is that, for example, if at least on the driver or delivery partner side, if there are frequent feedback points about safety issues from different customers, then this helps flag out potential recommendations to the driver or delivery partner to take safety refresher courses. Because this assessment is actually not Grab trying to assess anybody, it's the passengers or consumers providing the feedback to the driver or delivery partners and vice versa. There are also instances whereby certain consumers keep getting flagged by different driver or delivery partners, and Grab as a platform also reaches out to them. So these algorithms help to ensure that the platform is safe and reliable for all sides of the people who use it. So that's on the algorithms. Then the last part about how have we incorporated feedback and changed the experience for users. So let me give a couple of examples. One of it is that, in some places we have very large malls with many exits and drop-off points. Basically, in the very large malls where there are different drop-off areas, there's been feedback that, sometimes the passengers can't find a driver can't find the passengers. And with that, we actually got the feedback and created more specific pickup location points in order for the algorithm to be able to, help allocate passengers and drivers to very specific locations. So this has helped improve the experience for both the driver partners as well as the passengers themselves. So that's one example of getting feedback. Second one is actually, this is for food delivery. Some of you might be familiar with the concept of batching, which is basically when one person, one delivery partner carries more than one order at a time, so you can be a bit more efficient in dropping more orders along the way. This is in an ideal scenario, great, but of course, not all batches are great. Because some merchants have very long waiting times. And that's where we do get feedback from the delivery partners to say, hey, there are certain merchants that always regularly experience long waiting times. How do we then maybe exclude them in batching allocations until they are able to fix their wait times? So these are all data points that we collect from the delivery partners as well in order to help improve the experience. Yeah, sorry, that was quite a long answer.
I cheekily packed 3 questions into one, so I should be the one to apologize instead. And so now turning to the actual worker experience, I know, Jovana, your research has touched on how regulations can influence power dynamics between platforms and workers. So comparing states of regulation, how do workers' experience differ in areas where there is weak versus stronger regulation? What types of initiatives have you seen in specific countries or geographical contexts that can address the sort of unequal playing field? Jovana?
Yes, so I can tell you in short about very interesting study me and my colleagues have done. It has been published in a Journal of Management Studies, so you can access it, it's open access. And what we have done in this study is we went to uberpeople.net, which is the biggest forum where Uber drivers talk to one another. So imagine them looking for some tips about best cars to buy or insurances and so on and so forth. They would go on this forum and they would ask for tips. So what we did is we scraped the entire text data, and we had all this data about what are Uber drivers talking to one another, and also what they think about the company, what are some issues they're facing. And we had metadata, meaning we knew whether Uber driver is located in what we termed weakly regulated city or strongly regulated city. And all the data was from the US. So for example, New York would be considered a strongly regulated city. And that is because of how difficult it is for a ride-hailing company to enter the market and fees they have to pay, but also on the driver's side. So New York has background checks. It costs about $3,000 or so to become Uber driver, at least at the time of our data collection. So it is very heavily regulated market, compared to, for instance, Los Angeles or San Francisco, whereas you just need a driving license, anyone can become a driver. So this is more what we call weakly regulated city. And we asked, what is the sentiment of Uber drivers, depending on whether they're in this weakly or strongly regulated city? And what we found out that is that in these more weakly regulated cities, drivers tended to act sometimes in a ways that would harm the company. For example, at that time, Uber did not allow tipping on the app, so you could not give a tip. And then we saw drivers in these weakly regulated cities post signs in their cars. Tips are great, we welcome tips. We even have a credit card machine if you want to pay by card for the tip. So they would tend to much more behave in a ways that were harmful for a company. Whereas in these strongly regulated cities, we found that drivers wanted to work with the company. They wanted to help Uber towards its end. And the way we explain this is that in these stronger regulated cities, company like Uber is much more dependent on the drivers because it's much more difficult to become a driver in these cities. And it's also for these companies, it took them a long time to get a license to operate in the city. So there is more dependence between companies and workers in this case. So they kind of try to make it happen because drivers also need to recoup their investment. So imagine if they took them $3,000 to become a driver, they will want to make it work because they need to recoup the investment. But in these weakly regulated cities, this dependence between companies and workers is much less strong because they don't depend so much on one another. Anyone can become a driver. So Uber has much bigger pool of drivers to choose from. And similarly, workers can also work for multiple platforms because there are multiple platforms that operate in the city. So they're also much less dependent on the company. And that is probably why we see that at times they behave in ways that can be directly harmful for the company. So our study basically showed that regulations can definitely affect this power balance between companies and those that work through them. I will post a link to the study in case anyone wants to read it in more details.
That's great. Thank you, Jovana. And I just wonder how that sort of plays out in the cloud-based platform, Kyoungmi. Have you seen any sort of system level interventions that can address this sort of issues?
Yes, okay. Remember that regulation banned riding share services, closing down the businesses. In this case, the people who were working as Tada drivers filed a lawsuit. In Korea, there are legal protections that prevent companies from shutting down their businesses at will if they have employees. The regulation on the platform can be deemed as having given the platform the right to terminate the workers. So my opinion on system level initiative is that the priority is to create a structure in which all the market participants can reconcile their interests rather than interfering on the market directly. To make this possible, it is necessary to improve the treatment of the labor force and to create a structure so that the labor force can have bargaining power to coordinate interest with other market participants. Actually, the policy intervention in Uber, Tata, and taxi business are direct and artificial interference in the market. Such a method does not make the chance in which the market can find its own ability to respond when new forms of business emerge. Also, the Korean government and National Assembly overlooked the fact that the status and positions of the labor force within a single tax industry can be very diverse. Currently, the Korean tax market is in a different situation as the number of taxis operating after 6 p.m. is decreasing. The self-employed tax license is very expensive. Therefore, the average age of self-employed taxi operator is quite high, and they only work until around 6 p.m. before leaving work. In contrast, the age of taxi drivers belonging to the taxi company is relatively young because they don't have enough money to buy the license. They quit their jobs and switch it to food delivery platform workers as food delivery platform flourished after pandemic. There were many flexible workers among Tata drivers, which means that the main working hours of Tata drivers are after 6 p.m. Many criticize that the current situation would not have happened if the Tata service has not been banned. What the government and the National Assembly have to do is to create a structure in which various market participants can coordinate their interests with equal bargaining power and to establish the policies that enable them to settle.
Yeah, we've seen a number of regulatory responses that tackle some of the issues, but most attempts are there to mitigate the downsides of technology rather than to harness and to shape the potential of technology to serve public interest. A lot of the discussion typically in US and Europe tend to center around worker classification, pitting the debates to a binary between self-employed and employed, with the UK being the only country that has a sort of a middle classification for workers. So I want to turn to Jamie. So how do you think that governments and regulators can look beyond this self-employed, employed binary to ensure that the longer term interests of workers, consumers, and businesses are sustained in the long run?
Thanks, PeiChin. I think that's a great question because I think when we're very focused on the binary of whether a worker should be an employee or not, it ignores all the benefits that they are trying to get out of the situation that they're in right now. And we've seen a lot of backlash in some of the markets which has tried this method, like in Europe, in Switzerland, Geneva, when Uber Eats was forced to classify their delivery workers as employees. Majority, in fact, almost 80% of them lost work opportunities. So there was a lot of trade-offs in this aspect. So agree on looking beyond just the employment classification. In fact, some workers don't even want it themselves. In Spain, I think when they announced it, workers went on a protest to say they want to be freelancers, not employees. So in terms of how to think about it, I think 3 areas that we've at least been thinking about at Grab as well. First thing is shift the focus towards what kind of protections this new form of workers need. Instead of talking about it in like, should you be an employee or not, all the employee benefits, it's more about breaking it down to the protections. And once we firstly listen to the gig workers to understand what areas of protections they're looking for, then how do we then come up with ways to meet these needs that not necessarily follow the exact format of how an employer provides it to an employee. It's quite critical because we need to maintain the difference and unique work structure in this gig economy. Second thing is, while we are really focused on trying to protect the interests of the workers, it's important to understand the trade-offs of the different stakeholders in the ecosystem together, because the last thing we want is to create a backlash that then causes a problem to the gig workers themselves. For example, we know that in trying to increase protections, there's likely going to be increasing costs involved. And only when consulting with different stakeholder groups together and figuring out how would you implement something like this in what shape or format, will we be able to minimize the backlash. Because if something was introduced very quickly, likely prices will rise suddenly, abruptly, and consumers might say, oh, okay, then maybe I just don't need this service anymore. And the ones that will immediately be hit are likely going to be the gig workers, because suddenly there's no demand and there's no income. So the question is how to avoid a sudden shock in the system as we move together on this. So understanding the trade-offs together with the different ecosystem players. And finally, the last thing I'd say is being open to innovation and different ways of doing things, like whether there's regulatory sandboxes we can experiment with, because honestly, around the world, everyone is still trying to figure this out, and there isn't really a perfect solution. So we're going to have to look at new solutions to address these needs, because the traditional forms of employment clearly didn't address some people's needs, which is why this innovation came up. And then to solve additional protection needs arising from this new innovation requires new solutions as well. And at Grab, we've been thinking about it in these ways as well. We've actually laid out a set of principles of what we believe a sustainable gig economy requires, and have been building our commitments and initiatives around helping to get us there as one of the ecosystem players. These commitments relate to the topics of flexibility, financial security, professional development, fair work conditions, which are all the things we do raise about. And we also frequently engage in dialogue with the other stakeholders, especially policymakers, as well as think tanks or researchers who are trying to understand the topic. And because we're a platform that has stakeholders on all the different sides, we have the gig workers, the consumers, restaurants as well. We find it helpful to be a conduit to help raise the voices of the different sides of the marketplace, so that policymakers also are able to have the right information and understand the trade-offs as we develop solutions and policies.
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. And I think the sort of a multi-stakeholder dialogue is always very important for any sort of challenges like this. So we've got 10 minutes left, and I wanted to use the time and open up the floor to questions. Do we have any, please? Yeah, there's a mic in front. Yes.
Is that working? Just a quick question. Do you think with the drive in the gig economy, essentially everybody will, to perhaps talk to that employee-employer relationship and how the gig economy has made it a little bit tricky for policy to keep up with it? Do you think ultimately everybody will be their own entity? So maybe everybody will be an LLC, and that they will engage, even now how they engage as an employee with an employer, they'll actually engage as contractors, and everyone ultimately will become a contractor in the end? Do you think that that's what we're going to see happening? That's for the whole panel. Thank you.
Anyone like to take that?
I can first reply. I think that might happen in some places, but I think that alone may not address some of the needs and protections the gig workers may have. Because I think if we're just purely focused on whether or not what your classification should be, sure, they can get registered as an LLP, but there are surely outstanding protections that people are still asking about. Even if they're registered as an LLP, will those protections still be needed? And in that case, beyond the classification of what position they are, what kind of solutions are available in the ecosystem to ensure that these people's needs are met? Because this is a really important question, because the future of work is going to be very diverse. It's not just going to be platform workers on Grab that you're familiar with, or Uber, even knowledge workers, freelancers. I think more and more people are realizing that they don't need to be an employee to earn an income. And in that case, if a lot of social protections are tied to an employment relationship, then that's not a solution for the future in the world. And so I think it's really going to be a broader question beyond employment classification and what classification you should be, but rather how do we rethink social protections in a world where they're going to be diverse types of work?
I think definitely the sort of policy approaches in a context where technology advancements is taking place so rapidly needs to be very flexible as well. So I'll take one more question from the floor and then turn to the virtual audience before we carry on.
Hi, I'm Sky from Singapore. I have a very general question that I would like to have your opinion on. So I think a lot of comments have been made about the advantage and disadvantages of the gig worker and the gig economy. And I think a lot of emphasis have been placed on protecting these gig workers. And one of the key arguments is that there is a lot of financial instability for these gig workers. And one of the things that gig workers are concerned about is moving beyond doing this gig work and moving towards formal employment. So I was just wondering, as a company, gig workers are, of course, an essential part of the company in generating profit, right? So how willing or how can the company actually encourage the workers to move beyond doing gig work and moving towards formal employment? And how would that actually hurt the profitability of the companies? Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe this is one for you as well, Jamie.
Sure. So I think that's a great question. And I think the reality is, like we said, there's a diversity of gig workers who take up gig work. Some of them do indeed want to move on to different employment. And I'd like to say, this is something that I think as an economy, as a country, we need to work on this together. For example, actually at Grab, we do partner with organizations like Workforce Singapore, and the goal is to help ensure gig workers who want to move out to different locations get access to the right resources to support them in the process. Gig work fulfills a need in the economy because they either need a temporary source of income in the meantime, but we can play a role together with other ecosystem players as well to be able to facilitate the transition should some of the gig workers want to do so. I think looking at it as a standalone for a company, it's going to be quite challenging for a company to alone say that, hey, I'm going to try and upskill people to leave the platform and take on a job in a totally different industry. Financially, you're absolutely right. It doesn't make sense. But we believe that we also want to do what's right for people in the gig economy to make the gig economy even a viable temporary option for people. And that's why we'll seek to partner with different organizations to let those who want to make the transition have access to the resources to do so.
So I've just checked the online Q&A. I don't seem to see a question. There was a comment there. So I think I can kind of carry on, please.
Thank you. I really resonate with the question that came before. And I'd just like to add on to that a little bit. I'm from Malaysia, and last month in Malaysia, Grab and Food Panda workers went on strike for better social security. They mentioned in that strike that they bear some costs like carrier bags, they work very long hours a day. And immediately after that, I noticed a competitor in Malaysia, they said they now offer full-time employment and minimum monthly wage and medical benefits and things like this. And that made me think, as a former gig worker myself and now in full-time employment, companies like these have different kinds of staff. The delivery riders are not the only staff in Grab. So for a sustainable gig economy, to what extent do the benefits that full-time employees who are behind a desk at Grab have rights, the equivalent of drivers? I'm not sure if my question is clear. I'm just saying that staff should somehow have equal rights behind a desk or on the road. And does this line up with Grab's vision for a sustainable gig economy? Thank you.
I guess it's me again. So yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a great question. I think the one key difference of people taking up gig work versus an employee is really the flexibility. I think my boss wouldn't really like it if I just decided not to turn up for work any day and then just went offline whenever I wanted. So I think the nature of work and flexibility that's given in formal employment versus non-formal employment is quite different. So that as a starting point, I think it's important to acknowledge. But nevertheless, I think regardless of the forms of work, that's why I cited earlier that what are social protections that are reasonable for all members in the society. The question is, if that's a question to be answered, then the solution may manifest itself slightly differently for people who have choice to just log on and log off whenever they want versus employees. the question, I think when you cited examples about, some players coming out with offering full-time employment opportunities in their business model, the question will then be about a trade-off, because once you have a full-time employment kind of a structure, the reality is you're going to have a headcount limit. How many people are going to be able to easily access the earnings opportunities? Do you have to go for an interview, and what's the quota of how many people can get hired? So that then erodes a lot of the benefits that some people are seeking in the gig economy, which is a quick, easier access to money and earnings opportunities, and the flexibility of work as well. Because I'm pretty sure if you have an employed worker, you're going to be a lot more controlling in how the kind of hours and the way they work as well. So there's going to be a fine balance between flexibility offered and as well as the way social protections will be offered, either by if you are an employer-employee relationship, there's already a clear way of how it's done. But the question that hasn't been answered is, if you're not in a traditional form of employment, what's the best way to ensure those protections are offered without eroding the quick access to earnings opportunities and flexibility that gig workers really value?
Actually, before the pandemic in South Korea, gig workers have been excluded from unemployment insurance because they are not full-time workers. But during the pandemic, the gig workers created a union and demand them to include the employment insurance. As a result, an amendment to the law was proposed in 2020 and passed in 2021. It is not perfect, but many gig workers are covered by employee insurance. So actually, the Korean society, the goal for insurance is, like the goal that anyone who incomes can cover all the insurance. Actually, it will take very long time, but we are heading for that. So actually,
Thank you, King, for raising that. Because actually in Malaysia, I think you cited you come from Malaysia. Malaysia does have policies and schemes for self-employed by Sokso Perkesu, right? And so the question is about whether or not the gig workers do enroll and participate in those programs. I think the model right now is that for platforms, all the cash is just given to the gig workers to take home right now. And it's up to the gig workers' discretion on how they want to contribute to different schemes that they qualify for. So yeah, thank you for reminding. Thank you.
So I think we're just coming up to time. So I'm afraid I won't be able to take more questions, but our speakers might be able to stay on. I don't know. So you might be able to direct your questions, but I just wanted to bring in Jovana. Can you tell us, what is this kind of scene looking like in Europe?
I just want to briefly comment on this super interesting discussion that was going on, and great questions from the audience as well. On the reclassification question, I just want to add that I definitely agree with Jamie that there would be a trade-off, but I would disagree that flexibility would be one of them. I think flexibility could be written into employment contracts as well. We're seeing that a lot post-pandemic with the office kind of jobs. As long as workers do 40 hours, right? It doesn't matter if they come to work at 9 a.m. or 11. And this could be same with gig platforms. I do agree, however, that platform economy would look very different because platforms are able to offer such swift and efficient service to customers precisely because they can adjust the supply in real time. If everyone would be in employment contracts, that would simply not be possible. As Jamie also mentioned, that would need to be calculated into the costs. That would be a limited number of workers each platform would be able to hire, and so on and so forth. So the prices would rise for customers. The wait time for food delivery, ride, or anything would probably increase as well. I would urge us to think maybe about a hybrid model. There could be maybe a model that we could envision where there is an independent contractor model of course, with all the social security rights, or as the discussion was going on, mentioning that there needs to be some agreement on what rights the workers need to have, and that needs to be detached from the employment status. But perhaps there could be a choice also for workers that depend on these platforms for full-time living and want to work based on an employment contract, of course, with taking into some trade-offs into account. So I would urge us to also consider some hybrid model. There is not this binary situation, but we would give workers also a choice to decide.
So hybrid flexibility choices. So thank you so much to our wonderful international panel for sharing your insights. I think given that this is a global challenge, a global phenomenon, it is really critical that we hear from different perspectives and to continue to kind of reflect on them. So please welcome me, please join me to give our panel speakers a round of applause. Thank you so much.